Well, good morning and welcome once again. I'm Kevin Williams of Survival Skills Rider Training, and this is my twice weekly live webcast, Elevenses. It's show number 402. It's Wednesday, the 17th of January, and I've got a fairly long list of quite short stories today. Bit of a dearth of big ones, but got some interesting stuff all the same. Sadly, the first ones are all about fatalities. A rider has died during the Dakar rally. An inquest has recorded a verdict of accidental death on a fatal Snetteron pile-up that happened last summer. The coroner has reminded New Zealand riders that roads are not racetracks following a charity ride-out dual-fatality. That was back in 2018. Meanwhile, over in Miami, police have been clamping down on illegal bike use at a holiday weekend, and nuisance bikers have damaged reservoirs in Northern Ireland. A new pothole partnership is pressing for road repairs. In the Sindh province, the governor there has promised free bikes to replace stolen machines. That's a weird story. We'll have a look at that one. Meanwhile, in Nigeria, Okada riders are being handed free but numbered hi-vis to wear on the premise of improving safety, but also enforcing regulation. And we do have some spy shots, or one spy shot anyway, of a new twin cylinder motorcycle, but I'll be asking if it's a Guzzi or if it's an Aprilia. Now finally, today's in-depth item will be continuing our look at crashing by asking if training actually works, and by looking at the data and the research. So that's what we have today. Don't forget the if you have anything that you want to ask, anything you want to say, drop me a line. I'm more than interested to hear what you have to say. We have Nigel and we have Kevin both looking in this morning, regulars both of you. Good to see you both. Right, I hope you enjoy today's show. Let's crack on. Now, first things first, something of an apology really. What should have been Monday night's online talk on understanding camouflage and how it works and the implications for our clothing as part of the Science of Being Seen series, that didn't go entirely according to plan. I lost my internet connection on Monday afternoon around about 4 o'clock, so I postponed the show. It was back at about 10 past 8 of course, just too late to start the show, so I rescheduled it for Tuesday. I spent a good hour updating all the various adverts and letting people know that the show had been rescheduled for 8 p.m. Tuesday, but I forgot to reset the data stream to the show itself. So I started it, wasn't sure whether it was working or not, couldn't find it, killed it, and then I had to have a second go at running the presentation, and that meant the original link that I sent out to everybody didn't work. So everybody who did pay for a seat to that show, they did get a PM with the correct link on it, but it is still available on catch up if you want to watch it, and the correct link should be in this particular link to my coffee shop. So if you missed it and you do want to catch up, it's there. That should get you to the right show. Now, second thing, I got some very nice words from Duncan Seed out in New Zealand, giving me a thumbs up for my coffee archive. Now, I dare say most of you will know that the majority of that is behind what I think is a pretty modest paywall. It's £3 for a month's access, or £3 a month if you want access to the basic archive plus more in-depth material. And Duncan says, just wanting to say that week after week, Kevin pumps out free content for anyone and everyone. If this sparks your interest and you want to know more, then it comes at a premium, as it rightly should, given the time he puts into the research and presenting such valuable safety information. And he goes on to say, the value that we as riders get far exceeds the dollar value that Kevin charges. I consider that if I can learn and implement one thing that will save my life, or I can pay forward to someone else, then it's worth every penny I spend. And I should point out that Duncan is actually a certified instructor out in New Zealand. I've met Duncan, worked with him a couple of times, and he's a thoroughly nice bloke. So thank you, Duncan, for that, and hopefully you'll see why I do ask you to support me in my work, if you pop over to the coffee archive and see what's over there. You can access the info index for nothing, of course. Right, now moving swiftly on, we come to the weather forecast for bikers, which should be on screen now, but it's the video. Let's try again. There it is. Right, okay, that's the wrong photo, isn't it? I've pressed the wrong button. There we go. That's the correct one. Now, the weather forecast. It's certainly been cold. Yesterday here in London, it barely got above freezing. We had frost on the lawn all day. And the short story is, for the next few days, things are set to continue in this same way. Remaining cold, and there have been snow showers in the north and west. They will continue to fall. And further south that you come, the drier and brighter it's likely to be. But overnight frosts will be slow to clear, so do watch out for icy roads while you are out there riding. Now, Wednesday's picture actually is fairly complicated because northerly winds will continue to bring these frequent and often heavy snow showers to Scotland and northern England. But there is a second band of rain which will possibly turn to snow, and that is travelling east to west across the southern part of England, and snow showers do look likely to affect the Irish Sea area and West Wales, but it should clear the UK, the eastern parts of the UK by the evening. Now Thursday looks generally brighter pretty much everywhere away from the coasts, but Northern Ireland could see some prolonged snow showers which could reach northwest England. There'll also be snow over northern parts of Scotland, and it will be another very cold day, barely topping freezing. Now Friday sees a hint of a change. Some rain in northwest Scotland, drier elsewhere, temperatures 3 to 4 degrees, but Saturday sees pretty much an end to the cold weather with a return to the more usual milder southwesterly winds, and temperatures will climb to around 6 to 7 Celsius. So end of the freezing weather is in sight. Right, okay, so on with some biking news. Time to put that banner up, which I put up a moment ago by accident. Now, the first story is, again, sad one. A Catalan racer, Carles Falcon, he has died as a result of injuries sustained at the Dakar rally, his team announced. He was 45 years old. He was taking part in his second Dakar when he crashed on January the 8th. And that was near the end of a special stage. He was actually found unconscious without a pulse, but he was revived. He was then recovered to a hospital, and on January the 12th he was transferred to hospital in Spain by medical plane. But the injuries, which included a fractured neck vertebra leading to cerebral edema, that's a swelling on the brain basically, proved too serious. And in Norfolk, the senior coroner, Jacqueline Lake, she's concluded that the death of a racer in a 5-bike start line collision was accidental. I covered this at the time. Sam Clues, who was 32, he'd been taking part in an event hosted by the Classic Racing Motorcycle Club at Snetteron on the 2nd of July last year, and the court heard that he'd raised his right arm just at the start of the race to indicate he had a problem, but he was then hit from behind. He was thrown from his bike and he was struck by a further 3 motorcycles. Now his bike, it was a Manx Norton 499cc machine. It had obviously been checked before the race, found to be in good working order, and Mr. Clues had just completed a practice lap without any issues, but just as the lights went out, then he was observed to look down at his bike and then raise his arm. And Marshall at the start line said that it was too late to abort the race. And sadly, he suffered multiple traumatic injuries, and although he received medical treatment trackside, he was pronounced dead at the scene. Another rider, man in his 60s, was taken to the Norfolk and Norwich University Hospital by air ambulance, and 3 other riders suffered minor injuries. And sadly, the theme continues over in New Zealand, where a coroner heard about a collision on the roads and stressed at the end of their address that public highways are not racetracks. Now, this sadly involved a charity ride that ended with 2 deaths in the rural area of Southland. on the South Island. Now, the event was organised by the Southern Brotherhood Motorcycle Club. It involved around 200 motorcyclists and 40 classic cars. This was held in November in 2018. Timothy Mears, 50, was seen to overtake a vehicle at an estimated speed of 160 kilometers per hour, so 100 miles per hour, and he unfortunately collided with Russell Blackford, 41, who was travelling the other way on a trip to visit his sister. Now, both riders died at the scene, but the riders was actually said to be friends. Now, witnesses said that Mr. Mears attempted to overtake several vehicles whilst approaching an intersection and a bend, which was described as rising to a brow. So, travelling in the wrong lane, he lost control after locking his wheel at the back, and the machine then went on to collide with Mr. Blackford's oncoming motorcycle. The inquest heard that the participants were briefed by a member of the club on the rules of the event, their expected behaviour and the proposed route, but also that many riders of the charity event, including Mr. Mears, were riding in a dangerous manner. Concluding the inquest into the death of Mr. Blackford, the coroner, Robin Kay, found that the collision occurred because Mr. Mears, riding at excessive speed, was on the wrong side of the road whilst negotiating a bend which he could not clearly see around. And he said, too many motorists are dying on New Zealand's roads as a direct result of poor decisions they, or, as in this case, another road user makes. Public highways are not racetracks. Right, okay, fairly solid, serious stuff there, unfortunately. If you do enjoy these shows, don't forget they go out Wednesdays and they go out on Sundays. They go out at 11. They're nearly always live, occasionally recorded, and very rarely I miss a show altogether. If you want to catch up with this particular show, then Survival Skills UK on YouTube is the place to go. Don't forget that all important UK. And you can also catch up with all my other videos over there, the 60-second safety and 60-second science series. Right, okay, so what else is going on? Well, in Miami, local police cracked down on the illegal use of ATVs and motorcycles and dirt bikes over the Martin Luther King Jr. weekend holiday, and videos of the scene showed ATVs and bikes being wheelied along roads in front of big crowds. Now, the operation began on Friday. It ran all the way through the weekend till Monday, and according to the police involved, the takedown of numerous violators engaged in participating or spectating in intersection takeovers at a location near Miami International Airport. Now, I assume what happens is they block the road so that they can basically use it as a racetrack for the afternoon. Now, officials said 165 arrests were made, 82 vehicles impounded, 16 stolen vehicles recovered, 25 firearms seized, and 621 citations issued. Over in Northern Ireland, nuisance bikers have been causing problems there too, because they damaged 2 reservoirs, what's described as considerable damage to the embankments to these reservoirs, and photos of the scene show that the grass on the embankments has been badly ploughed up by tyre marks. Now, Northern Ireland Water warned that the result could be erosion damage impacting the structural integrity of the dams, because many of these dams are actually built of soil, and if you cut up the grass, you create a runnel down to the mud, and then if there's then heavy rain, that exposed soil is washed away, which in turn undermines the other grass, and it causes, that's how the damage occurs. And they said if there's any further damage, then it will make things worse, and it may even involve draining the reservoirs until repairs can be completed, and that couldn't be done until ground conditions improve. So emptying the reservoirs of course means likely there'll be water shortages. Now, the spokesman said, while some individuals see this as harmless fun, we appeal that they stop this dangerous activity immediately before there is a need to drain these reservoirs or a serious accident. Security patrols have been put in place to identify those involved. Any motorcycles using the sites, any vehicles observed offloading motorcycles will be reported with a view to legal action against the perpetrators. So again, it's fairly serious consequences from what seems like a harmless activity. It's all about choosing your place to do things like this. Right, over to a pretty bizarre story now. I've spent many hours talking about bike theft on the Elevenses, but this is a story with a difference, and that's for sure. Now, in Pakistan, the governor of the Sindh province, Kamran Khan Tesori, he announced that motorcycle owners in Karachi and the rest of the province whose motorcycles have been stolen will be replaced for free. Why? Well, he said they cannot bear to see the suffering of people who've lost their hard-earned motorcycles to theft because many victims simply cannot afford to replace them. So that begs a couple of questions, really. How's the state going to manage that? Well, he said that to avoid using public funds, he'll seek support from philanthropists and charities to purchase and recondition motorcycles for the victims. And he said in the first phase, 2,000 people will be receiving these reconditioned motorbikes if their machines were stolen during October, November and December last year. Which begs a second question too. It's hard to see really how this could ever be sustainable over a long-term period. And I'd also imagine that people who had their bikes stolen in an earlier period or are yet to be stolen won't be too happy with the plan as described. Meanwhile, in Nigeria, the governor of Oyo State has announced that 15,000 free reflective jackets will be distributed to the commercial motorcycle riders, popularly known as Okada. Now, this exercise was explained away as having two aims. First of all, to help ensure the safety of the riders themselves, but also to separate authentic Okada riders from, quote, miscreants who parade as motorcycle operators but engage in criminality. Now, how are they going to do this? Well, each reflective jacket, it has a unique identifier and a barcode, and these will be handed out to the commercial riders who have registered with the Oyo State Health Insurance Agency. And the announcement said that what will happen is that if you scan that barcode, it will give you the identity of the particular owner of that reflective jacket. Now, the statement said that the first phase of the distribution will be closely monitored. It will be evaluated to know the level of adherence, and naturally, any non-compliance with wearing the reflective jackets would attract sanctions. It's, again, something of a weird piece of logic, isn't it? I can't help but think that you're going to end up with riders possibly swapping jackets and identities, and that's something that happens unfortunately here in the UK with delivery drivers. Quite a few have been stopped and they've been found to have false identity papers on them, and basically they are using a bike which is insured in somebody else's name. So what's to stop these miscreants, wonderful term that, if they want to move around undetected, what's to stop them from stealing these marked up jackets from the genuine Okada riders? It's unlikely they're going to stop for a sort of a routine check, is it? So, but they'll look kosher from the sidelines. Anyway, yeah, so if you have any thoughts on that particular story, I'd be interested to hear them. It's a bit of a weirdie, but anyway. Back in the UK, did you know we have a National Pothole Day? I didn't. I don't know when it is, and I wonder how we're supposed to celebrate it. Maybe do something like put a plant in a pothole or something, I don't know. But I'm sure the new Pothole Partnership, which has been formed by the AA, the National Motorcyclists Council, British Cycling, IAM Road Smart, and the BMF, British Motorcycle Federation, and the manufacturer JCB. I'm sure they will be able to tell us. Now, the Pothole Partnership aims to respond to, quote, shock new figures from the AA, which show that pothole damage has hit, quote, a 5-year high. And they dealt, they say, with 630,000 pothole-related incidents in 2023. They say that's the highest for 5 years, and they say it involved staggering 2 million vehicles, and damage has cost the owners £474 million. That's bad enough, but even worse really is that the 2018 analysis by the AA revealed that in 2017 there were 545 vehicles involved in injury crashes where the road surface was a contributory factor, and nearly half of those injured were, perhaps not surprisingly, cyclists and motorcyclists. So on Monday, the partnership sent a 5-point pothole plan to the government, and here they are. The first is that repairs should be permanent, temporary repairs should be limited, and where possible potholes should be repaired permanently. They should be precise. Repairs should be to UK repair and inspection standards. The price, accelerated spending of the 8.3 billion pothole fund for England should have total clarity on how it's distributed to local authorities. Provision, in other words, guaranteed ring fencing of road maintenance funding to deliver innovations to enable permanent repairs. More on that in just a second. Progress, transparency from local authorities on their repair backlog. Many don't answer requests, freedom of information requests, I've noted. Now, JCB's inclusion is interesting because you may recall from a show a year or two ago that they have actually constructed a new pothole fixing machine. I think they claimed it was pretty inexpensive too. Now, what it does is it speeds up the repair. It automates it basically, so you just drive the machine to the pothole and let the machine do its stuff. It also does a proper job of fixing damage. The old road surface is scooped out and a proper sealed repair is put in, so they don't just slap a bit of loose tar into a hole only for it to disintegrate again a few days later. So it's said to slash repair costs and do a proper job. There's just one problem, of course. The pothole plan is itself a patch on the problem, if you'll allow me a bit of alliteration there. When a pothole develops, it's not a random weakness. It's a symptom of a failure at the base level of the road. And the only permanent way to repair it really is to dig up the entire road surface and repair it from the bottom up, not top down, as soon as the potholes start to get out of hand. If they're a patchwork of potholes, basically the road is finished. Right, okay, so let's have a quick look at a motorcycle then. I said there would be one bike in the show, and here it is. Now this picture has been doing the rounds of biking websites, and the speculation is it's going to be a new Moto Guzzi, and it's the engine is based on a 35 kilowatt 47 horsepower parallel twin, and that's lifted from the Aprilia RS457 sports bike. Now both Aprilia and Guzzi are owned by Piaggio. Now what's the difference is, well, there's a steel tube frame. It's replacing the aluminium beam chassis of the Aprilia sports bike. And there's also an unusual sort of single shock mounted on the swing arm, and the wheels appear to be lifted from the Aprilia. The rest of the bike itself appears to be a lash up. There's that awkwardly mounted headlight at the front. There are various other components such as the tail light, which have been identified as being from the Guzzi parts bin. Now, as I say, the online speculation is it must be a new Guzzi because there appears to be a Guzzi logo covered up on the tank. And the assumption is that developing a brand new V-twin engine for a new model would be prohibitively expensive for Guzzi and Piaggio, but I don't think anybody's considered the alternative. This chain drive parallel twin might just be a retro naked Aprilia rather than the Guzzi. Now, why do I think that? Well, the first reason is that there is a very strong tradition for V-twins and shaft drive that Moto Guzzi, they're really well known for those, and those features attract a loyal user base. Secondly, they already have the Euro 5 compliant V7 neatly serving the A2 market. It would seem daft to bring a similar powered bike to target the same license category, unless possibly the V7 couldn't be made Euro 6 compliant if and when that particular level of emission regs comes in. So I think personally, some ways it would make more sense to offer a retro styled Aprilia using repurposed parts from the Guzzi range than to attract a new user base that don't care that it's a chain drive parallel twin. So There we go. If you've got any comments on that, I'd be interested to hear them. And Sue's looked in. Good morning to you, Sue. Nice to see you. Right, so, okay, as I said, a fairly short show this morning. So over to the in-depth item where we are going to be looking at rider training, and we're going to be trying to answer the question as to whether it has any positive effect on rider safety. Now, last time out, I went into some detail of the history of rider training in the UK, starting from the end of the Second World War right through to the current day. Well, let's think about the question as to why we think rider training might work. Now, the conventional view of road safety holds that riders who crash must be failing to conform to the rules and/or lacking in skill. So the assumption has always been that if you enforce the rules and teach people until they attain a suitable level of skill, they won't crash. From that perspective, it's then easy to say that those people who do crash either therefore broke the rules or they didn't have adequate skills. You'll find typical descriptions in crashes of phrases like too fast for the conditions or lost control. It's something of a circular argument though, isn't it? And it doesn't stop because as crashes continue to happen, the thrust has always been to make new rules, stricter ones, and to deliver more training to give riders even more skills. So, as I've said last week, the training has evolved across the UK since the end of World War II. So, has it had any positive effects? Well, it's hard to say really. The jury is probably out on this. That would be my own opinion. The photo. I'll just zoom in on that to give you a slightly clearer view. That's 1960s, and that's British Pathé News, as you can see, a still from a film looking at motorcycle training, and that's a policeman sitting there on the little velocette back in about 1960. Now, I went and looked at the data. I tried to compile a complete timeline from the 1950 to the present a few years back of all the UK's motorcycle killed and seriously injured data. Now this turned out to be a really, really tough task because I couldn't find a single document that actually had the data over the complete timeline. In fact, what I did find were a number of different sources, each of which held fragmentary data. There was some overlap between them, so I could be reasonably certain that data from one source was actually accurate if the overlap agreed. And I did build up an almost complete timeline in the end. There were a few years where I didn't have data. And here are the two interesting observations that I made directly from what I gathered. Now, firstly, the big dips in fatality rates did not match up with legislation on testing and training. You can drill back, as I say, through the data, and you can see the years covered by the RACACU voluntary scheme of the 50s and 60s, the slightly more organised BMF training of the 1970s, Star Rider in the 1980s, right up to the introduction of compulsory basic training in 1990, the introduction of direct access to the bigger bikes in 97, right forward to the current system we have with the off-road mod 1 and on-road mod 2 two-part test, which comes with the EU mandated tiered license system. Now what I found was there was a dip that matched up with the introduction of the then new part 1 part 2 test that was introduced in the early 80s. Now you may recall from last week's show that the part 1 test was an off the road around the cones exercise. You could either take that at a vehicle test site with a DSA examiner, or you could go to an approved training school where you get some training, usually a day of training, and then the test at the end. So it wasn't compulsory to go to school, but a lot of riders did because it was easier. It cost more, obviously, but you were more likely to get a successful result. If I remember correctly, you could just keep doing the test until the school closed for the day, until you passed it. So did this new test actually reduce crashes? Well, it appeared not. Because I also had a second data point to look at, and this was how many motorcycles were on the road. Now I measured this by looking at the number of motorcycles that were kept taxed and on the road. And the Part 1 test, you'll remember, was also part of a package of measures that banned outright the Hells Angels 250cc motorcycles, which we grew up with in the 70s. It also slapped on a 12 horsepower and 125cc limit for a learner bike. Now, the result was an immediate slump in the number of motorcycles kept taxed and on the road, and the crash data actually corresponded much more closely with the motorcycle pool. In 1990, we saw the introduction of CBT. That was compulsory, it was basic, it was training rather than a test. And although the DVSA were quick to claim that it was proven that the CBT had reduced casualties, I remember that in the briefing notes that I got when I became a CBT instructor a few years later. The intervention, I couldn't see any obvious results in terms of a dip in the annual KSI rates that again weren't linked to a reduction in motorcycle usage as revealed by the numbers of taxed motorcycles. And frankly, nor has any serious research that I've ever seen suggested any link to reduced casualty numbers. So what about the current state of affairs, where we have the rather loathed, I think, round the cones module 1 test before you can go out on the road and do the module 2 test. And of course you've also got the tiered licenses introduced by the EU and maintained by the UK. Now again, I can't see any obvious effect on casualties. In fact, the latest figures for the last decade and a couple of years now, it appears to show that motorcycle casualties have pretty much flatlined. And that could in fact be linked to the unfortunate state that encourages the youngest learners to avoid taking any further riding training beyond CBT. Remember, if you passed the 125 test at 17, you would actually only get a license for the 125 you were already riding on L plates. So not surprising, hardly anybody bothers with that. But rather than talk casualties, let's look at a second observation. When you look at where motorcycle crashes happen, what sticks out like a sore thumb is we're still having the same crashes in the same places our great-grandparents had back in the 1950s. If you ask what's the most common crash, the answer is still the right-of-way violation resulting from the looked but did not see error and ending up with the so-called sorry mate I didn't see you Smithy collision. Now simply looking at 70 odd years of data, I can't see any evidence training is achieving any improvement in terms of the standard bike accidents, junctions, corners, overtaking. They remain the same in the KSI figures as they always have. So what do research studies tell us? Now I've previously reported research has failed to show long-term benefits. More recent research from many parts of the world seems to be indicating that the provision of this comprehensive practical rider training, the best that you can say for it is it has mixed results on the motorcycle crash rates. So for example, there's evidence that suggests that advanced driver training didn't always have a positive effect on crash rates and sometimes even had a negative effect. Now, training aimed at teaching complex skills such as how to recover a vehicle from a skid, that probably sounds like an attractive option if you have a lot of riding and driving, or driving probably, done on icy roads, actually may be contra effective. Now, the inference here is if you give drivers the skills to recover skids, they feel safe to drive more quickly and end up having more skids, which they then can't control, not fewer skids, which they do manage to control. Head to Taiwan 2021. I've recently found a new study. It suggests there that road safety classes for novice riders have a short-term effect in reducing the frequency of both motorcycle related offences and crashes, but it couldn't actually provide any evidence of a long-term effect on the rate of motorcycle crashes. So presumably riders started off nice and cautious with what they knew, and then when they didn't crash, they presumably stopped applying some of the lessons. Now, on the other hand, a 2014 study from the Netherlands, this was carried out as a 2-year evaluation, so quite a long-term study here. They looked at a 1-day advanced rider training course delivered by the Royal Dutch Motorcyclists Association. Now, this course teaches motorcyclists to recognise, analyse and anticipate potential traffic hazards. I don't know any more about it than that. It's something I need to go and look at. But basically what they found was that this iRiscar training has a positive effect on safe riding behaviour and hazard perception by motorcyclists in both the short term, the first few months after training, and the longer term, 1 to 18 months after training. And post-training, the riders exhibited safer traffic behaviour compared to a control group without the training. So there we have a positive outcome, and that possibly gives us a hint of where the problem with conventional training lies. Most of our conventional training is all about mastering the mechanical, the technical skills necessary to ride the bike, the skills to brake hard in an emergency, the skills to swerve most recently in an emergency have been added to the training, and perhaps that's not the answer. So next week, more on the latest research, just where we should be directing our training efforts. I'll try to answer that question. So that is it for today. Thank you very much indeed for looking. A couple of comments to read out here. Fresh cuppa from Nigel. Thank you very much indeed, Nigel. That's very kind of you indeed. That's my new automated feed into the link has popped up from coffee. Okay. Next show will, as I say, I'll be looking at that problem of motorcycle training. I will just thank again those who came along to my presentation and apologise for the confusion. Thanks to the broadband outage. Now, don't forget, if you have enjoyed the show, do take a moment to like, subscribe, press all the various buttons, ring all the bells and all that kind of nonsense. That's always much appreciated, whether it's over on Facebook, whether it's over on YouTube. Do check out the other videos, 60-second safety, 60-second science series. They all offer you information that's useful, but in a quick and easy to watch format. And do tell your buddies about all my videos and other events. That's always very, very helpful to me indeed. That is it today. As I say, slightly shorter show than normal perhaps. So hope you've enjoyed it, hope you found it useful, and hopefully I'll see you on Saturday, Sunday for the next show, of course. And if you are out there, don't forget it will be icy in many places, so stay shiny side up.